order to drive a headbox to pump out MIDI signals and do darn. MIDI's really cool. Another place to start playing around, particularly hardware.
Yeah, MIDI's basically the be-all, end-all of fun digital audio controls. Basically everything works on MIDI these days. I have a few more things. Hang on a sec. You're always so pushy. I just wanted to take a few minutes and let you know about, I guess, the number of communities that exist on the internet for advice, for trading loops, samples, tracks in general. For those of you who are local, one of the forums I hang out on quite a bit is clevelandnightlife.net, and there's a producers forum for people who produce music. Great way to get feedback on tracks that you've been working on, great way to trade samples, trade loops, etc. A number of local communities exist out there. I'm sure you can find one for any local community, really. There's the futureproducers.com website, which has some articles, has some forums. They could use some help with their web design, but the content's actually pretty good. And again, it's a way of getting a lot of information, trading experiences with a lot of other people. And then one of my other favorite forums on here is something called the Freesound Project, which is essentially a loop and sample trading community. Everything posted on here is under a Creative Commons sample license. So all you have to do is attribute the author, and you can use all sorts of fun samples on here. I've gotten some great Rhodes samples on here, all sorts of electronic piano samples on here, a lot of old school analog sounds that are hard to find these days. There's something like 16,000 samples and loops on the Freesound project right now, so great for that. There's also, of course, then a forum on here for trading advice, trading tips and tricks and things like that. But yeah, communities, there's a lot of support out there, basically. There's a lot of people who can help you out, a lot of people who can give specific advice, answer specific questions for you. All you got to do is find it. And now you can do your thing.
I didn't get to start this talk. Anyone use Linux or purely free software to do it? You know, it doesn't have to be purely free software. I guess the DSPs can flip in there here or there. So if you know anything about professional Linux audio, this is going to be absolutely worthless for you. Because let me give you sort of the combination, introduction, disclaimer, and what I'm hoping that all of you will get out of this talk. So I don't really consider myself to be a musician at any level. I use audio tools more from a performance type of standpoint. I should be starting my computer. More from a performance type standpoint. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be showing you, I don't really necessarily know how to make do anything particularly practical. My goal is to give you guys some good Googleable keywords so that you aren't starting completely from scratch, and things like Jack and Ladspud don't just sort of scare you and start running in circles, which is really easy to do because there are very few comprehensive tutorials on how the professional Linux production audio environment is put together. And because I don't do this very often, I never figured out how to make my computer start the external DAC without restarting. So it'll take a second. Sorry. So I mentioned my background was more in a performance side of things. The core, something that Jim didn't mention, I think, which is sort of a necessary prerequisite to what I'm going to be talking about, is that running out and buying lots of expensive hardware, while it gives you lots of shiny toys, and there's sort of this instant feedback to bright and shiny toys, will in no way make you a good performer or a good musician. You will just have sunk many thousands of dollars into hardware. I'd say that if you're serious, or even if you're only moderately interested, the minimum that you probably need is a keyboard controller, and they can be really cheap. There's one sitting in the back of the room that's, I believe, an M Audio that probably ran in the neighborhood of $120. Learning to play piano is not necessarily, is probably a worthwhile use of your time if you're interested in doing audio production at, anything more than clipping together samples.
I'm going to add, you don't necessarily get very good at learning piano. Just a basic knowledge of you don't have to work a lot. A little basic to the keyboard.
Yeah, it's working. So a basic, keyboard type controller will get you pretty far on the route that you want to go. After that, pretty much anything that you might want to be able to do in hardware, you can do in software, though it might be a little more difficult. The other caveat that I need to give you guys about sort of the world of Linux audio right off the bat is that you're going to have to be concerned, and I'll again give my preface on that it's not really Linux audio, is that latency is the biggest issue that anyone has to worry about. And because of sort of the whole nature of the beast, it's up to you to worry about latency instead of the operating system sort of magically coding over it until things break in a really bad way. So if you start reading around the Linux audio forums, people say not very nice things to folks who run, for instance, the 2.6 kernel, because its real-time type scheduling stuff isn't really up to Linux audio production standards, although I honestly haven't had any problems with them. As I said, I do things more from a performance standpoint rather than a let's see how many filters we can put on this to break our machine standpoint. So I sort of have made these two caveats that when I say Linux audio production, I really mean sort of free audio production. At the core of the Linux professional production, blah, 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 is this low latency audio server called Jack. So how many people in here have gotten at least far enough to, play an MP3 under Linux? Most of you? Oh, goodness. So there are two low-level audio drivers in the Linux kernel currently, one of which is going away, one of which is nice and pretty, which are OSS and ALSA. OSS is worth forgetting, except that I assume it's easier to program for, which is why people still keep writing interfaces for it. ALSA is the other one. It has support for more hardware these days. Hardware support's going to come back to bite us in a little moment. On top of that, people write ridiculous numbers of daemons to make it so that you can play audio from multiple sources at the same time, simplifications to the API, such as like port audio, so you only need to write software for port audio instead of writing for both OSS and ALSA, and I assume it goes to other places as well. ESD, ART, things like that, which you may or may not be familiar with, and which is why sound under GNOME and sound under KDE work differently. Thank you for making it worse. All work differently. The direction people are going in sort of is two ways. There's GStreamer for desktop users, and then there's Jack for more professional users. Jack sits on top of this ridiculous high stack and can run either through OSS or ALSA, or if you're under OS X, it can run through Core Audio without any problem. The reason this is great, was forgetting to take a breath there, sorry. The reason that this is generally fantastic is that when you're running on OS X on top of Core Audio, you no longer have to worry about things like, oh, Linux doesn't really have any drivers for any FireWire audio interfaces, which if you already own something or come from a Mac world, you probably have a FireWire interface. Fortunately, USB 2.0 interfaces are, for the most part, pretty well supported, and they work almost the same. I can get into a rant about why FireWire isn't supported in general, and it has to do with things that I really don't understand, but we'll talk about at length anyway. So there's two pieces of hardware. I've talked already about one piece of hardware that you might want to get, which is a keyboard controller. If you're doing a different type of production, though, the other thing that you might want to invest in is I want lots of signals coming in, I want lots of signals coming out, so I can, record a band, which very easily gets up to, 10 inputs when you have 5 on the drum set. So pay attention, particularly if you're considering working in a free software environment, to take a look at what's supported before you take the plunge to spend, $800 on an I/O box. support keeps getting better, but it's far, far from perfect. The good thing is that most entry-level interfaces are all supported, so the absolutely atrocious built-in sound card on my laptop works just fine, and this presentation is going to be really interesting because I'm going to do fun things like try to mic the crappy speakers on my laptop so that you can hear awful sound. By the way, is anyone here who's lived in Australia for any period of time? No, okay, good. So you won't be reminded of childhood inadequacies. Get to it in a moment. So I talked a little bit about Jack, which is the wonderful end-all be-all of sort of low latency sound in the open source environment. All that Jack does is it's like a patch bay in the physical world, except in a low latency way. So in a low latency type of environment, which I'm going to stop saying from now on, it patches together programs. Programs generally just get connected straight to your output, but Jack gives you the opportunity to do things like patch together lots and lots of programs, which I'll try to demonstrate in a little bit, and also patch together lots and lots of different filters. I'm avoiding the light because no one can see my. Let me quickly get Jack started here. This is just QJack control that runs in its own pretty way. But this is what pops up when you get Jack all happily configured, is that their inputs on one side, outputs on the other side. Right now I'm running it through an ALSA driver, so we have inputs and outputs from ALSA. And it's also, by the way, a dirty lie, because all the inputs on this computer are mono, but it takes it as stereo. But we'll ignore that for the time being. So let's make something play just to get us started. And the easiest thing is always running a drum machine, because it'll loop forever, and, well, it doesn't get that annoying that quickly. Can you tell I'm used to a much, much bigger window? Desktop? Oh, that's right. You can't hear anything. Okay, so this is going to be the really interesting part where I'm going to do things and claim that sound is coming out, and you're all just going to have to believe me until I unmute things. So when I ran Hydrogen, what it did is it said, I'm going to be using the Jack output driver, so take it away. And it opened up two outputs, and it automatically connected it to, the input inside of Jack, which ends up throwing out music. Inputs, outputs, I just sort of start randomly babbling, and they become the same thing sooner or later. Okay. Fortunately, Jim didn't take much time, and this is taking me much longer than I expected. I'm just unmuting things because I was testing earlier. Okay, so, oh, that's not going to work at all. I realized I actually did something without telling you guys about it. So this is QJack control again, and I hit play here, but the setup that was inside of Hydrogen, which is our drum machine of choice for today, also started playing. One of the things about Jack that you'll quickly notice, particularly if you're coming from a more professional audio background, is that everything's its own program. So suddenly you have to synchronize up all of these programs that are more or less independent. In the hardware world, you do this all via MIDI and send MIDI machine controls and say, ready, go, at the appropriate times, and things would go or not go if things are broken. So in the Jack world, there is a master transport that will synchronize up everything that cares to synchronize up, which unfortunately isn't quite everything you'd ever want. So in certain circumstances, you're still stuck with not doing everything you'd ever want. But let's add a couple more. Are there questions, comments? People can interrupt me. I don't mind. Tangents are fine. And, you know, if you get me too far off, I'll just start talking about how I like to shave with razors from the 40s and